Imagine driving a car where the Federal Reserve is like violently slamming on the emergency brake,
That's
right?
right.
But the American consumer is just stubbornly stomping on the gas pedal at the exact same time.
Which is a terrifying way to drive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that is exactly the dynamic defining the commercial real estate market right now. I mean,
Right.
if you look at a national economic weather map, you see this deep, immovable freeze.
Yeah, the cost of capital is just locked in ice.
Right. And transaction volume across a lot of the country has completely stalled. But then, you zoom in on the state of Texas, you look specifically at the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, and the map is just glowing red hot.
It's completely divergent from the rest of the country.
It really is. We are seeing this incredible collision between a frozen macroeconomic environment and, frankly, boiling local retail fundamentals. So welcome to our deep dive into the commercial real estate news for the week of June 12th through the 19th, 2026.
Glad to be here.
And today's insights are brought to you by Eureka Business Group, the authority in Dallas-Fort Worth commercial real estate brokerage specializing in retail.
Yeah, and that contrast between the frozen national capital market and the heat of Texas retail, that's exactly what makes this week's data so critical for you to understand if you're listening today.
Definitely.
Our goal today is to unpack the most important transactions, market signals, and, tenant shifts from this past week. And we're tailoring this specifically for An 31 exchange buyers and retail investors operating right here in the DFW market.
Because the rules have changed.
Oh, fundamentally. The rules of engagement for capital deployment have completely changed. Navigating this landscape requires strict discipline and a crystal clear understanding of where the leverage actually sits right now.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because let's start with the national financial gravity
Mhm.
that is pulling on every single deal right now.
The big picture.
Right. Before we look at the local DFW landscape, you have to understand the dynamic between the cost of capital and the health of the consumer. So this week, in Chairman Kevin Warsh's first meeting, the Fed voted 12-0 to hold the federal funds rate at 3.50% to 3.75%.
And that's for the fourth straight meeting?
For a straight meeting, exactly.
No.
But more importantly, their dot plot signaled possible rate hikes in late 2026.
Which nobody wanted to see.
No, not at all. And at the same time, we have the advanced retail sales report for May showing consumer spending rising a surprising 0.9% month over month.
Wow.
Yeah, that easily beat the 0.4% forecast. And it happened despite, elevated gas prices tied to the Iran conflict.
Right, so the consumer is just ignoring the macroeconomic warning signs.
Exactly. The consumer is spending, but the debt is incredibly expensive. Right now, triple net debt is quoting around 6.3%, while retail cap rates are sitting at 6.5% based on the Boulder Group's recent data.
Yeah, that's tight.
It's a painful scenario. It's known as negative leverage.
Huh?
I mean, if your debt is costing you 6.3%, but the property is only yielding 6.55%, your margins are razor thin.
Barely there.
Right. After accounting for any unforeseen expenses or vacancies, you are essentially paying for the privilege of holding the building.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to ask, how does any transaction make sense right now without banking on a future rate cut to bail you out?
What's fascinating here is that it makes sense because the market has officially capitulated on the idea of near-term rate relief.
Oh, so they've just given up.
Completely. The higher for longer base cases, well, it's no longer a warning from the Federal Reserve. It's the entrenched reality.
Right.
Because you're facing negative or incredibly thin leverage, your underwriting must rely entirely on what is actually in the building today.
I mean by that.
I mean, you're buying the in-place rent, the tenant's credit rating, and the remaining lease term. You cannot underwrite a deal based on some hypothetical refinancing upside 36 months from now.
Because that upside might never come.
Exactly. But transactions are still moving forward because retail is offering a unique durability that, frankly, other asset classes simply cannot match right now.
Like office space.
Oh, absolutely. When you look at the commercial mortgage-backed securities data from TREP this week, retail delinquency is hovering in the mid-sixes. I think it was 6.61%.
Okay.
When you compare that to the bleeding office sector, which is currently seeing default rates well over 11%, 11.53% to be exact, retail looks like an absolute fortress.
Wow. Almost half the default rate.
Yeah. The consumer is spending, the rent is being collected, and the debt is performing. So that's why capital is willing to accept tighter margins on the acquisition side. Investors are happily paying for certainty in a really uncertain macroeconomic environment.
Yeah, and that flight to certainty on a national level is physically reshaping the footprint right here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex.
It really is.
Because consumers are clearly spending money, but where they're choosing to spend it is drastically shifting. This week gave us a masterclass in that divergence.
Yeah, the contrast was crazy this week.
Unbelievable. On one end of the spectrum, we have the absolute dominance of grocery. H-E-B opened a 112,000 square foot store in Irving, and shoppers literally pitched tents and camped out for the opening.
Tents? For a grocery store?
I know, people are treating it like a blockbuster movie premiere.
Yeah.
And H-E-B also secured land for a potential second store in North Fort Worth.
Right.
But then conversely, Saks Global announced this week that the historic downtown Dallas Neiman Marcus flagship will close its doors for good by September 30th.
Which is just wild to think about.
Yeah, laying off 67 employees.
So we have people pitching tents for a grocery store in Irving while a legendary luxury flagship in downtown Dallas is shuttering. Is this just, the death of the department store, or is there a bigger lesson here for Eureka Business Group's retail investors about where foot traffic actually lives post-pandemic?
It's definitely a profound signal about the permanent migration of foot traffic.
Yeah. The legacy urban footprint, which was always heavily reliant on discretionary luxury and, office worker density, is facing severe repositioning risks.
Because the office workers aren't there 5 days a week anymore.
Exactly. That density simply hasn't returned in a way that supports massive, multi-level luxury flagships in the urban core.
Right.
We're seeing a structural shift toward experiential, daily needs, and grocery-anchored retail in the suburbs. Those are the new premium anchors. The consumer has basically decided that convenience, wellness, and food and beverage in their immediate suburban neighborhood is where they want to spend their time and money.
That makes total sense.
Okay.
And that actually brings up another fascinating data point from H-E-B this week.
Yeah.
They're dropping over $500,000, $500 to $2,000 to be exact, on a remodel in New Braunfels for their Fresh initiative.
Yeah, I saw that.
That's a massive capital expenditure for an existing store.
It is, and that is the true metric investors need to watch. I always say, don't just look at the grand opening ribbon cutting. Look at the plumbing bill.
The plumbing bill, I like that.
Right. A $500,000 remodel focused on fresh food and convenience means they are cementing their footprint. Grocer capital expenditure is the ultimate signal of a center's long-term relevance.
Because they wouldn't spend that money if they weren't planning to stay for a very long time.
Precisely. When an anchor invests heavily in their physical space to capture high-frequency daily visits, they're building a massive moat around that location.
So for an investor, what does that mean?
For an investor analyzing a shopping center, the presence of an expanding, high-traffic grocer fundamentally changes the value of the adjacent shop space and outparcels.
Right.
And that's why the development pipeline is aggressively following the rooftops into the suburbs. Trademark Property Company just announced Whole Foods will anchor the 40-acre Shivers Farm project in Southlake.
Yeah, that's bringing, 111,000 square feet of retail and office?
Exactly. And down south, NewQuest just broke ground on a massive 544-acre mixed-use venture called Seguin Exchange near San Antonio.
Wow.
These projects are entirely predicated on capturing that exact suburban household growth.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. If daily needs, suburban retail is the clear winner, we need to look at who is actually writing the checks to buy these assets in a 6.3% debt environment.
Yeah, follow the money.
Always. The transaction tape for the DFW area this week reveals a really intense dynamic. We're seeing a massive barbell effect in the market.
How do you mean?
Well, on one end of the barbell, the institutional whales are deploying massive resources. We saw Kite Realty Group and GIC partner to acquire Legacy West in Plano for a staggering $785 million.
Which is just a huge number.
Massive. That's 344,000 square feet of luxury retail, office, and apartments, and it's over 95% leased. So the institutional money is certainly there for the crown jewels.
Right.
But then you look at the other end of this spectrum, the middle market. JLL brokered the sale of a 5-property strip center portfolio. 4 of those locations were in DFW, and 1 was in Waco.
The M3 real estate deal.
Yep, they sold from N3 to Curbline Properties, which is the strip center real estate investment trust spun off from Site Centers. Meanwhile, on the private capital side, Prudent Growth Partners bought Scenic Square in Rowlett for $7.4 million.
Right, fully leased to service-oriented tenants.
Exactly, including a Baylor Scott& and White outpatient rehab facility.
Hmm.
It's almost like fishing. The institutional whales used to stay in the deep ocean hunting massive marlin like that $785 million Legacy West deal.
Yeah.
But now, because debt is so expensive and they need yield, they are swimming into the shallow ponds to eat the exact same trout the private buyers are hunting.
That fishing analogy perfectly captures the current threat to the private investor. Because if we connect this to the bigger picture, the most critical transaction for you to understand this week is not the $785 million trophy deal.
Yeah.
No. It's that Curbline portfolio acquisition. Institutional capital is no longer confining itself to massive power centers.
So they're dropping down market.
Yes, the Curbline deal is a direct signal that institutional REITs are actively aggregating the exact $3 million to $20 million unanchored multi-tenant strip centers that private buyers and family offices have traditionally relied on.
Wait, why are the institutions suddenly so interested in a standard neighborhood strip center in Waco or DFW? What's driving them down market like that?
They're targeting these properties because the service-oriented daily needs tenant base is proving to be incredibly sticky.
Sticky meaning they don't leave.
Exactly. Think about it. If you own a strip center with a dentist, a boutique fitness concept, a local restaurant, and a physical therapy clinic, those tenants are insulated from e-commerce. You can't get a root canal or physical therapy on the internet.
Very true.
Institutions recognize that this specific tenant mix offers durable, predictable cash flow, even in a high interest rate environment. But, and this is the key, when you have institutional capital dropping down into the middle market to buy these unanchored strips, it severely tightens the available inventory.
So it squeezes out the smaller guys.
Precisely. For the private investor, this means the days of taking your time to analyze a $7 million neighborhood strip center in Rowlett are over. You are now competing against well-capitalized, all-cash institutional buyers who value that exact same durable cash flow.
So you have to move fast.
Incredibly fast. Private capital must move with financing already lined up and strict underwriting standards, just to secure quality retail assets in Texas right now.
And that intense competition in that $3 million to $20 million range creates a massive pressure cooker for one specific type of investor, the 1031 exchange buyer.
Oh, they are feeling the heat right now.
Definitely. If you are executing a 1031 exchange, you're operating on a ticking tax clock. You have exactly 45 days from the sale of your relinquished property to identify a replacement property and 180 days to close.
And that clock does not stop for anything.
It does not. And this week, we received confirmation from advisory firm KLR that Section 1031 remains fully intact under the newly passed One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or OBBA. So this means the legislation itself is not the risk, execution is the threat. Missing that 45-day window triggers an immediate massive capital gains tax burden.
Which can be devastating.
Yeah, the psychological pressure of hitting day 40 without a property locked up is immense. And because direct, high-quality inventory is so tight due to that institutional competition we just discussed, investors are desperately looking for alternatives.
Which explains the DST boom.
Exactly. Kiplinger reported this week that Delaware Statutory Trust, or DST inventory, has hit an all-time record of $3.9 billion.
Yeah, and that $3.9 billion record in DST inventory is really functioning as a critical relief valve for the market.
How does that work exactly?
Well, a Delaware Statutory Trust allows an investor to buy fractional ownership in institutional-grade property to satisfy their exchange requirements. And crucially, many of these are debt-free offerings.
Oh, which eliminates the negative leverage problem we talked about earlier.
Exactly. It solves the debt issue entirely. We actually saw a great example of active asset management in this space locally. Cove Capital recently converted several gross leases to triple net leases at their Burleson, Texas DST just 3 months after raising the capital.
Okay, so they're actively improving the property.
Right. That active management improves the yield for the fractional owners.
But let me ask you this. If you're a 1031 buyer with a strict 45-day window, and you're competing against institutional REITs for a DFW strip center, you need a safety net. What is the actual strategy for deploying capital when the clock is ticking and inventory is this tight?
The strategy is called dual tracking, and it requires absolute discipline.
Dual tracking.
Right. Because you're facing fierce competition and elevated debt costs on direct acquisitions, you just can't rely on a single target property to close.
Too risky.
Way too risky. You must actively pursue your direct acquisition, whether that's a multi-tenant strip in Rowlett or a net lease asset in Cedar Park, while simultaneously having a debt-free Delaware statutory trust, offering fully vetted and lined up with your qualified intermediary before day 45.
I see. So if your main deal dies.
Exactly. If your primary direct deal falls through on day 40 due to financing falling apart or, unexpected issues during the inspection period, you do not have time to find a new direct property. You seamlessly pivot your capital into the backup DST to preserve your tax deferral. You must run both tracks simultaneously.
Got it. And along with that tight inventory, net lease buyers also have to meticulously monitor the corporate health of their tenants.
This is huge right now.
Yeah, we saw a massive shift in the net lease space this week. Yum! Brands announced they are selling the Pizza Hut business for $2.7 billion.
A huge deal.
Massive. They're splitting it between private equity firm Long Range Capital, which is buying the business outside China for $1.5 billion, and Yum China, which is taking the mainland operations for $1.2 billion. We also saw Realty Income acquire 7 Parker Kitchens in a sale-leaseback deal, which continues to set a pricing floor for high-quality convenience assets. But that Pizza Hut transaction, that's jarring.
It definitely wakes you up.
Yeah. If you bought a Pizza Hut property thinking you had a rock-solid corporate lease, how does a private equity buyout suddenly change the safety of the net lease asset you thought you were buying?
Well, it changes the safety profile entirely because of the mechanics of a private equity buyout.
Okay, walk me through that.
Because, when you buy a single tenant property, the value of that building is entirely dependent on the strength of the corporate guarantee backing the lease. If the tenant stops paying, the building is just an empty shell.
Right.
When a private equity firm acquires a major quick-service restaurant brand, they typically execute a leveraged buyout. This means they load the operating company up with massive amounts of debt to pay for the acquisition.
So the tenant suddenly has a lot more bills to pay.
Exactly. Suddenly, the corporate entity guaranteeing your rent payment has a mountain of new high-interest debt to service. If pizza sales dip, your monthly rent check is suddenly competing with their Wall Street creditors.
That is terrifying for an investor.
It is. Furthermore, a private equity takeover often signals a shift in corporate strategy that trickles down to the franchise level. That can lead to aggressive cost-cutting or store closures. Net lease owners must rigorously stress test their quick-service restaurant exposure.
So you can't just blindly trust the brand name on the sign.
Never. You need to verify exactly who is guaranteeing the rent, thoroughly understand the unit-level economics and profitability of your specific location, and really confirm the financial health of the operator in the wake of any parent company restructuring.
So what does this all mean for you listening today? If you're a retail investor navigating the Dallas-Fort Worth market right now, the Federal Reserve's decision to freeze rates and signal a higher-for-longer environment essentially dictates your entire strategy.
Yep, it's the foundation of everything.
It means you must buy strictly for cash flow, durability, and tenant credit, completely removing any hope of near-term rate cuts from your underwriting. You have to follow the foot traffic, which is overwhelmingly migrating toward grocery-anchored, daily needs, and service-oriented centers in those expanding suburban corridors.
Stay away from the urban core.
Exactly. You must avoid legacy urban footprints that require massive repositioning to survive. And finally, if you're operating on a strict 1031 exchange timeline, you must exercise absolute discipline. You are competing against institutional whales swimming in the shallow ponds for mid-market assets.
Which means you need that backup plan.
Right. That means you need a flawlessly executed dual-track strategy with a Delaware statutory trust backup plan ready to deploy. We really want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive brought to you by Eureka Business Group, the premier experts helping investors confidently navigate the highly competitive and lucrative DFW retail real estate market.
And as physical retail continually proves its ability to outcompete e-commerce for daily needs and experiential traffic, I'll just leave you with this final thought to consider. We are watching grocery anchors pour immense capital into fresh initiatives, wellness services, and, community-centric footprints.
Yeah.
As these properties absorb medical uses, dining, and daily services, we really have to ask, will the grocery-anchored shopping centers of 2030 stop looking like traditional retail altogether and instead become the indispensable primary civic infrastructure of the modern American suburb?
Man, that is a profound shift in how we build our communities. And it proves that while the national capital market may be locked in a deep freeze, the ground right here in Texas is radiating heat, reshaping the map one neighborhood at a time.